Last week, I went to see Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. For a few weeks now, I've been reading articles and reviews on this movie. One could say that I've been a bit obsessed with the brouhaha that this film is generating. I rarely go to see a movie on its opening night because I don't like crowds. Considering all the attention that this film has been getting on the internet, I expected this one to be packed. I bought a ticket early to make sure that I got one before they were sold out. I drove 10 miles through rush hour traffic to get a ticket for a movie that I knew I wouldn't like. People do strange things. I'm no exception. One thing I felt sure of was that I would not fall for Ben Stein's bullshit. But when I entered the theater, it was too late. I already had. This show was hyped on the internet as one that would create a following of religious activists on par with the Passion of the Christ. At the beginning of the movie, the viewers occupied less than a fourth of the theater's capacity. This was the 7 o'clock showing on a Friday night. I noticed that the great majority of the audience were senior citizens. I overheard one member of the audience say, "I love Ben Stein." It had not occurred to me that Stein had a fan club, but evidently he does have a small following. The premise of the movie is that academic freedom and freedom of speech is being compromised for the sake of maintaining a conspiracy among the scientific elite to prohibit any questioning of the scientific theory of evolution. Throughout the film, Stein and other creationists who Stein interviewed constantly referred to evolution and scientists as Darwinism and Darwinists. This served their purpose on trying to portray scientists as an isolated group who dogmatically cling to the 1859 book On the Origin of the Species, and consider every word of Charles Darwin to be absolute truth. The fact of the matter is that there is no such thing as Darwinism or Darwinists. Nobody is a Darwin dogmatist. Stein even goes as far to label the scientists that he interviewed as Darwin apologists. Throughout this piece of propaganda, to put it politely, there are scenes of the Berlin Wall, Nazi death camps, Soviet oppression, and the like, juxtaposed with statements reflecting Stein's childish, limited, and erroneous view of evolution. I guess that these juxtapositions were meant to be funny. I gathered that because the small audience laughed every time this propaganda stunt was presented. I saw nothing funny in this film. Nothing at all. I would be willing to give them credit if they managed to get me to chuckle just once. But this movie is just not funny. I realized that the so-called jokes were funny for a specific audience. This was Rush Limbaugh and Coulter kind of humor. It is meant for an ultra-right-wing audience. Here I will put forth some background information that explains how we got to the point that Expelled can be created and marketed in 2008. In the first part of the 20th century, the opposing point of view to the scientific theory of evolution was pure creationism. This means that the creationists were fundamentalist Christians. They considered every word of the Bible to be the word of God, inerrant and infallible. There really was a Garden of Eden, a talking snake, Noah and his ark, etc. They knew this to be true because it said so in the Bible. That settled it. These creationists formed a very powerful political force that led to the legal banning of the teaching of evolution in public schools in 3 states: Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. In 1925, John Scopes was arrested for the crime of teaching evolution in a public high school in Dayton, Tennessee. This was the famous monkey trial. Scopes was found guilty. He was fined $100. Think he got off easy? At least he didn't do time, but $100 in 1925 would be the equivalent of just over $1,200 today. By the early 1960s, a creationist by the name of Henry Morris put forth a new strategy to combat the teaching of evolution. This is the next phase in creationist history. Creation science, as it was called, proposed that all the stories in the Bible could be proven with scientific evidence. The result was a raft of bizarre distortions of science promoted by such people as Kent Hovind and Duane Gish. Persons such as these argued that their claims were scientific and ought to be taught in public schools alongside of evolution. In 1987, the Supreme Court ruled that the teaching of creation science was unconstitutional and a clear violation of the Establishment Clause. That is, creation science established a preferential treatment of a particular religion in public institutions. At this point, the creationists came up with a whole new direction they called intelligent design. They eliminated all references to the Bible as well as the most ridiculous claims, such as an earth that is less than 10,000 years old, a global flood, humans coexisting with dinosaurs, etc. Intelligent design proponents claimed that an intelligent designer created life on Earth. They insist that this is not religious because the designer is not necessarily God. It can be anything you want it to be. In the Dover trial, 2005, the court ruled again that ID was religious, a violation of the Establishment Clause, and not to be taught in public schools. Here is where Expelled comes in. Once again, the creationists, in the style of Wile E. Coyote, have come up with their new plan. All of a sudden, this becomes a free speech issue. Not only that, but the creationists are a victim of persecution by the establishment of big science. And introducing Ben Stein, the star of Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. Stein takes the viewer through a journey like a museum guide, showing exhibit after exhibit, demonstrating that there is an evil conspiracy of Darwin worshippers who are viciously attacking anyone who would question evolution. Overall, Expelled has a shoddy feel to it. It seems disconnected and poorly constructed. Most of all, it's boring. I'll give you a rundown of what Expelled is all about. Here is how Stein portrays the scientific community and the intelligent design brand of creationists. There is an evil empire of Darwinists who hold sacred the theory of evolution and refuse to let any other point of view into their well-protected fortress of big science. Darwinism is an evil philosophy that demands that its subjects abandon their religious views, embrace atheism and eugenics, and declare that human life has no meaning or value so that they can establish totalitarian dictatorships and commit Hitler-esque atrocities. Intelligent design proponents are just trying to be reasonable, and they only want the idea that there is some kind of intelligent agents behind the existence of life on Earth to be fairly considered. The flick really is that absurd. Ben Stein conducts interviews with scientists such as Michael Shermer and Richard Dawkins. He also interviews alleged victims of academic repression. These interviews are obviously edited to suit the purpose of the filmmakers. I would like to see the uncut footage of these interviews with the scientists. What appeared in the film was just a hack job. On Skeptic.com, Michael Shermer writes about the comparison that he makes with Darwin's theory of evolution and Adam Smith's theory of economics. That was part of the interview with Ben Stein. That would be interesting to learn about, but evidently too interesting to be included in this dull movie, so it was cut. Go to part 2.